Welcome to Gospel Truth with Andrew Womack, a teaching ministry that focuses on God's unconditional love and grace.
Jesus forgave us of all sin, past, present, and even future sin.
The first time I realized that Jesus took the absolute penalty, punishment, all of it for my sins, that was freedom for me.
And now, here's Andrew.
Welcome to our Monday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. Today is a very special broadcast. Matter of fact, this entire week I've got a special set of broadcasts where I'm going to be interviewing my good friend John Tesh. And of course, most of you know him. He probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but John and his wife Connie Selica have become good friends, and John overcame cancer, has written a book about it. It's really going to bless you, so stay tuned for our John Tesh interview. Today we've got something very special. I've got John Tesh with me, and I'm going to be interviewing him and talking to him. And John, it is a real honor to have you on my Gospel Truth television program.
Well, back at you. And the headline of this is the reason I'm still alive is because of you and Karis and of course Jesus Christ. But it's an interesting story of how I got healed, and it's a story I think that'll be an encouragement to other people.
Well, we definitely want to get into all of that, but you know, when you first contacted me, we held a meeting in Riverside, California.
That's
and
right.
They said that John Tesh and Connie Selica wanted to see if there was a time to meet me, and I had never heard of you. Which
was awesome.
I'm embarrassed. There's probably only one other person in the United States that had never heard of you.
Well, you would have had to have watched Entertainment Tonight for 10 years.
And I never have
Right,
seen
I
it.
figured. And you would have had to watch bike racing and Olympic gymnastics. So,
And I didn't do
right,
that.
there you go. So you were right. You picked a lane that was in between mine.
But let me say this for that one other person that hasn't known
That's
who
not
you
true.
are. But anyway, I've got a list here. You have been inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame, North Carolina Music Hall of Fame. Your sports theme for, I think it's NBC, is
For
it
basketball, yeah.
They said it's the greatest sports theme in television history.
Somebody said that. I didn't say that.
You're live at Red Rock's concert. Now, I have seen that after I met you, and man, I loved it. That was
not far from here.
That was awesome. You hosted Entertainment Tonight for 10 years, co-hosted it, and you now have a radio program heard on 350 stations with 14 million people each week. And I'm sure there's many other things, but man, what an honor to have you on my program.
It's so great to be here, and we can do the Mutual Admiration Society, all day here. But I'm really happy to be here to talk to you.
Let's tell the people about how we first met, that very first time in Riverside.
Yeah, it's and you know, it's a story you've heard before. I know this because I know Connie and I have been to maybe 4 or 5 of your meetings, most of them in Phoenix. But I was diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer, of prostate cancer, and it didn't make any blood markers. So meaning that normally for a guy you go and you get tested, you get a blood test, and if you're PSA, PSA specific antigen, prostate specific antigen, if it varies or if it's very high, then they're like, well, something might be going on. Mine was really low. Mine was a 0.4 for 5 years. They're like, oh, you're fine. And then the doctor went and did the digital rectal exam, and he said, whoa, there's something's wrong here. We need to get this checked out, and we need to get this checked out. Ended up going from a sonogram to a biopsy, and then within a month, I was at Johns Hopkins having surgery, and I was given. They figured maybe 18 months to live.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean,
a death sentence. I mean,
it was literally when you see somebody pull the tablecloth out. That's how I felt. I mean, that we didn't know what we were going to do, and so I went through. I'll compress the time a little bit, but we went through the surgery at Johns Hopkins and then at Northwestern. I originally got diagnosed at UCLA, and these doctors did an amazing job. I mean, at that time I had faith for the doctors, and we found because Connie does this Intelligence for Your Health show, and I do the radio show, we were connected to. We were always talking to these high-level hospitals and universities, and so we found some great doctors, and they did a tremendous job. But the cancer just it kept coming back. I'd go in for scans, and they say, well, this lymph node lit up.
So when they did all this surgery, did they get it all? Did they feel like they had gotten everything?
Yes, they did. I mean,
but it came back.
And what happens with prostate cancer is that if you don't get it early enough, it can extend to other parts of your body, obviously, and lymph nodes is the number one thing. And so, I'm always saying that I think if you scan yourself enough, you'll find something, and so that's
true.
Right. And so that's what happened there. And in the middle of this, we were going to. Connie had discovered this church in Chino Hills, Calvary Baptist Church, and she'd heard Jack Hibbs, who actually you've had on your program before, and she said, I heard this guy on the radio, and I'm going out to see him, and you can come if you want. I was like, okay. So we went out there, and we really enjoyed it, and then one of our friends, who you now know, Cha-Cha Sandoval.
Yeah, she's a great lady.
She sort of randomly showed up at our house, and we hadn't seen her for years, and she said, I heard you're going to this church. Can I carpool with you? And he said, okay, fine. So we started carpooling with her, and she was also a cancer survivor. And so one day after surgery, she goes after the service, I got surgery on the mind. She goes into her car and she says, hey, here's a CD that you might like. Now, don't worry about the accents. It's a little wonky, as she said. He said, and I had just, people, since I got diagnosed, people had been handing me CDs and books and prayer things and, all kinds of stuff. And I said, oh, I don't want to.
So you were already a believer through all this.
I was a believer. I have two uncles that are Baptist preachers. I was raised in the Methodist church. But I would have to say that, once I met Connie, we ended up in a Messianic church, and which was wonderful. So yes, absolutely, my faith was strong.
Before we get too far into this, you need to mention Connie.
This is my wife, Connie Selica.
Yes, and I had heard of her because of Greatest American Hero.
This is terrible. So you had no idea who I was. You knew who she was.
I'd never heard of you, but I'd heard of Connie, and I'm sure she's got many other accomplishments in television. But
That's my favorite show.
Was Greatest American
That's what
Hero. I love the song that they had.
Yeah, Believe It or Not. Yeah.
It's awesome.
I loved that show.
Connie's
That's
a great
sort of when I fell in love with her back in the day. But so Cha-Cha comes out of the car and she hands us this CD. And I'm like, oh, please. So it's like an hour drive back to our house in Los Angeles. And Connie goes, give me that. And she takes the CD and she sticks it in the CD player in the car. And your voice comes out. And I was like, no, this is great. I'm home because my whole family, except for me, is from the South, the deep South, right? So your voice
it didn't bother you?
Oh, it bothered me. I was like, well, it sounds like my uncle.
Well, I think the first time I heard you talk, you got up and thought I was Gomer Pyle.
I was making a joke. I'm sorry. I think I'm not the first person to make that joke, though.
Yeah, I thought you were serious because I've thought that same thing.
Yeah, Gomer Pyle is a great singer, but he's got nothing on you. So anyway, I'm listening to this thing, and I actually wrote about this, and it's a funny thing because I'm leaning against the window, pretending I'm not listening, right? Because she put it in and I didn't put it in, right? And all of a sudden you're talking about. It's like you're angry at me from the CD. Like it's no, wait a second. You're killing yourself with the way you're talking, and I'm thinking, what are you? And then you landed on Mark 11:23, and you'll have what you say, and then Proverbs 18:21, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and all of a sudden I'm listening, I'm sitting up, right, and Connie's driving, because she always drives, and so so I'm sitting up straight and I'm listening now, and I'm paying attention, and this you're going through all of the scriptures and you're talking about how. You've got it wrong, don't limit God, and so we were so focused on this that we almost drove past our exit, and that really started us on the path to meditating.
Do you remember what teaching that was?
It was the CD collection, A Better Way to Pray. But once you got to Mark 11:23, I was stalled in Mark 11:23. I didn't want to hear anything else. I wanted to see it in every translation, and I'm sure you're putting it up, but it's all, whoever says to this mountain be removed and be cast into the sea and does not doubt in his heart. And I'm thinking, what do you mean doesn't doubt in his heart? And so this is our whole discussion, our whole
had you
conversation.
heard that before, or was that brand new?
I'm sure I had read it, but I just didn't. I just
sometimes when you're in a need, like going through cancer treatment, you listen and hear things that you don't normally get. God just spoke that to you.
Well, and they also say, from the secular world, they say that these marketing people know that, like, if you're not in the market for a car, you won't even see a car commercial on TV, right? I was in the market for life. But this is really important. I got cancer, was diagnosed with cancer the same year of my life, 63 years old, nearly to the month that my dad got cancer and died. And I believe, now knowing what I know now from your teachings, I believe that I manifested cancer in my life. I'm 60. If I make it to 64, I would have beat my dad, and cancer's after me.
Did you have a fear about that?
Yeah, that 2 a.m. thing where you wake up in the morning and you're like, and then my sister, had died of cancer too.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm just thinking it's hunting me down. So to have a weapon like the healing scriptures that you were talking about, and so of course Connie is, and you know Connie really well. She's a warrior, and she's like, okay, we're going to find Andrew Wommack and we're going to go to one of his meetings because we're all over your website, right? So sure enough, in like 2 months or something, you were going to be in Riverside. And then her next thing was, we're going to meet Andrew Wommack. And I'm like, well, maybe let's not bother him, And then we sort of sent the message that we'd really like to have a conversation with you about your impact on my life. That's the longest answer to a question you've ever had.
No, that was awesome. And I remember that meeting in Riverside real well. And I think we ate together a few times and visited and just fell in love with you guys. Yeah. And the thing that impressed me was that here you are with all of these accomplishments that I was talking about and stuff, and you were just like a little kid.
Oh, for sure.
With the Word. You were so excited about it, and I mean, the hunger and the excitement and stuff was so refreshing.
One of my favorite books it was a bunch of them, but Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl is as you know, is a Holocaust survivor, and a lot of that book is about suffering, of course. And even Jordan Peterson talks about suffering, and M. Scott Peck, who wrote The Road Less Traveled, that's the first part of his book, is that we don't understand that part of this world since the fall is suffering. So all of a sudden when you're not happy one day and you're suffering, it's like, why me, God? Why did you do this to me? And that was me. I figured that God could heal me if he wanted to, and maybe he didn't want to for some reason. And I'm looking back over the sins of my life and thinking, maybe that was the reason. But I had been through the suffering of the cancer. I had a terrible, I had a thing called an ileus after the first surgery, where they did this thing to me where they put an NG tube down my nose to empty my stomach. And I remember looking at Connie with tears in my eyes, and I'm sorry I said this, but I actually said, honey, please kill me, because I was in so much pain. And then after that, it was the chemo, and I didn't do well with the chemo. So it was like a boxer, right, who's just been beat to a pulp, and he's just softened up, and then the guy, his opponent, knows it just takes one more punch. So all it would have taken was one more punch from me. And when the seed of Mark 11:23 landed on my ground, it was fertile ground.
John, you've experienced success in the secular realm, television, music, all of this stuff in the way that very few people ever do. And yet here you are, all of that stuff didn't help you one bit when it came to dealing with cancer. And I think people watching this, that's a really good point to make, that it doesn't matter who you are or if you're at the top of your game right now or something, every one of us needs a relationship with the Lord. That's the only thing that'll sustain you.
What's interesting, amen. What's interesting about for about 2.5 years, I worked on my memoir, because the guys at HarperCollins, they were like, hey, you've been through hell. Why don't you write about it? And it took me a long time to write about it. But you don't have to write a book to do what I'm about to tell you. But my process of writing was I had to go back and connect the dots. So you don't walk around on any given day and go, Gee, I wonder how I got out of that, and we'll talk about this later, but I wonder how I got out of that tent when I was homeless at 19 and a half years old, and then three years later I'm anchoring the news in New York. I just thought, well, I just probably did a good job or something. But when you go back and you connect the dots and you look at the people who have loved you into existence and into success, and then you also look at what could have happened, and you're like, I know now, because I know that I know that I know that the Holy Spirit was with me, tugging me, and even though I was in and out of faith, I look back at that and I can see that, and so it's been and you can do that with journaling, right? You don't have to write a book. You can have a journal by your side of your bed.
I just did that same thing this weekend. I was studying John 14:8 about Philip saying, "Show us the Father and we'll be satisfied."
Yeah.
And it just dawned on me, he wasn't satisfied with Jesus. And so I wrote a little 8-page pamphlet on that, and it went back and talking about how God touched me. And it was similar to what you're talking about, that you go back and in hindsight, you can see things 20/20 that you may not have even seen when you were living through it yourself. So we want to go on. You had this cancer treatment, but then it came back, and we're going to talk about all of this. But I think it'd be good for you to go back. You've had a lot of things happen to you. You were kicked out of your home. You were kicked out of college.
Sure. Yeah.
Living on the street.
Yeah.
Most people who see you at all of these things, PBS
I'm a criminal.
specials and stuff, they don't know the background of where you came from. So.
And when we recorded the Songs and Stories special right here at Charis Bible College, in the most amazing amphitheater I've been in since Red Rocks, we told the story. It's the concert series is me called Songs and Stories on the piano, and it's me at the piano with stories about that you and I are getting ready to talk about here.
And I remember you showing you had an overbite or something, and your dad made us. I mean, it was terrible looking. The things that you've been through, most kids would never get over something.
Well,
like
I was
that.
born in 1952. So and I had two older sisters, and there was really, my parents were, back in the day, your parents didn't even know where your school was, now they have parents' night and everything. So they would just throw me outside, and plus I was the third kid, right? And they said, come in when the street lights come in. So I'd come in. That's
the way I was.
Right? Yeah. I mean, we're very close in age. You look younger than me, but you're a little older than me.
I'm 3 years older.
I know. So I lived a lot in the basement. And so that's really how I became. I took stuff apart. I was very curious, and so I would take radios apart and try to reassemble them. And I had a little organ down there, and I would play. I try to play Beatles songs and things like that.
So when you say you lived in the basement, were you a little separated from your siblings and the rest of the family?
My sisters were dancing. They were learning the dances from American Bandstand. And I wanted to record everybody's voice clandestinely, with the family intercom. I was precocious, but I was also really thin. I mean, I'm 6'6" now, and I weigh 225 pounds. But when I was in junior high, I was this height, 6'5", 6'6", and I weighed 152 pounds.
Wow!
So I didn't have any problem with girls. They couldn't see me if I was standing sideways. So no,
turn sideways, stick your tongue at you, look like a zipper.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So I mean, we've got all the way back there, but I was the class clown and stuff. So I was trying to get noticed, I guess is what I could say, And back in the day, my dad was a hero in World War II. He fought off the coast of Okinawa in an amphibious assault craft, the USS Panamint. And so when he, it was like there's a movie called Great Santini with Robert Duvall, where he's a fighter pilot. He just keeps his kids in line, like they're the troops, right? That was our family. Our dad tried to do that, didn't really work out. But I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be an entertainer.
From a young age.
Yeah. That's all I was doing. I mean, and I studied piano and trumpet with high-end teachers at like 6 years old, and I was in the marching band and the orchestra when I was 7. In fact, the marching band teacher, and we can talk about this later, but the way he directed me, the process that he put me through was a process that I use today for everything. So between 7 and 10 years old, you're so impressionable. But fast forward to being junior high, being a junior in high school, I wanted to go to on those college visits, right? And I wanted to go to Interlochen or USC or Berkeley School of Music, and my dad said no. He said, I've enrolled you in textile chemistry at North Carolina State University. My dad was the vice president of the underwear division of Hanes. So
So you had a desire to be a musician, and he had you into chemistry.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, he and rightly so. He realized that if I was a musician, that I probably would starve to death, right? So he's like, I got it all planned out for you. You're going to get in-state tuition. I'll move back to North Carolina. That's what he was saying. And so he put me in there in textile chemistry. And I lasted about 2.5, 3 years, something like that. And then I took a radio and television course, and I got bit by that bug. I just had to be like one of these guys behind the camera here.
Well, I read in this little bio thing that you actually got kicked out of college.
We're going to get to that.
Oh, okay. So I thought you had passed it up already.
No.
Okay.
It was you're a great interviewer.
I'm sorry.
No, what happened was I got bit by that bug, and I decided I had to change my major without telling my parents. And so I did. I tried to. I went to all of my professors with the drop ad cards, and I said, "Can you sign this, please?" And they all like, "Yeah, it's fine. We know you're not interested in making underwear." And so, by the way, I for most of my life I had free underwear.
Oh, well, some of the perks.
Yeah, right. In fact, I don't even remember my mom ever washing any underwear. She just threw them away.
You always had clean, brand new underwear.
Brand new, right. And
that's a piece of information that most people will never know about John Tesh. See, you get things on the gospel truth.
Oh man, you got free underwear? Come on, you're blessed. Yeah. So I finally got to my statistics professor, and he said, "No, I'm not signing this. We're past the drop ad date." And I said, "Well, I can't." I pleaded with him, and I said, "I can't change my major for another year." And he goes, "I'm sorry, I can't do that. That's university rules." So I went back to my dorm room, and I was lamenting all of this. And one of my friends said, "This is crazy. How many kids are in that class?" And I said, "Well, it's like 120." He goes, "Yeah, I know. Just do what I do. Just sign your professor's name to the drop ad card." Eyebrows went up, and I said, "I can't do that. That's forgery." So I thought about it, and I did. I signed his name to the card, regrettably, and things were fine for a couple of months. My major changed and everything, and then my report cards were supposed to come in the summertime. They didn't, but a letter from the university came to my father saying that I had broken the honor code, which I had, that I was being thrown out of the university indefinitely, suspended, they called it. And then my dad, to finish me off, called me into the office, and he had a scotch in his left hand and a cigarette in his right hand, and put down the cigarette, picked up this letter, and he said, he read the letter to me, and he goes, "Johnny, I'm sorry, but you're no longer welcome in my house."
Oh, wow.
And he kicked me out of the house.
Wow. How old were you?
I was 19, right, 19 and a half. And so I had like a little Volkswagen Fastback. I got in there, put my pup tent on the top. I had my Jimi Hendrix albums with me, and Jimi Hendrix is a guitar player.
Yeah, you have to tell me these. I've heard the name, but I couldn't have told you who he was.
No, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine.
I'm sorry. I've just been unplugged.
He's like Michael W. Smith, but with an electric guitar.
Gotcha.
Not at all like Michael W. Smith. So yeah, I took off, and I pitched my tent in a park in Raleigh, and North Carolina, and where NC State was. Girlfriend broke up with me, but I pitched my tent next to a payphone in case my mommy wanted to call. And then I worked construction, and I dug ditches, and I pumped gas at College Esso for about 4 months.
4 months you lived in a tent?
Yeah. The only prayer I knew was the Lord's Prayer, and I said that every night.
I know that you were blessed today by hearing John talk about what God's done in his life, and I tell you, it is just awesome. We got a lot more great things to share with you, so join us again tomorrow as we continue this John Tesh interview.
We hope you enjoyed today's interview with John Tesh. If you'd like more information about John Tesh or his book titled Relentless, Unleashing a Life of Purpose, Grit, and Faith, visit his website at johnteshrelentless.com.
This is the CD collection that Andrew and I were talking about when we were having a conversation, A Better Way to Pray. This is the CD that my wife put into our car stereo system, and for an hour we were driving around listening to something I'd never heard before. I grew up in the church, but I had never realized that I was praying and begging God. I was praying the wrong way, and that there was a better way to pray. And once I got the revelation of that, through this CD series, I was able to get healed.
So we're going to make this our gift to you. You can get this book absolutely free. We'll offer the CD set for a gift of any amount, and the same teaching that God used to change John's life can change yours.
You can get Andrew's book titled A Better Way to Pray in either English or Spanish absolutely free when you contact us. This offer is limited to one free book per household and is only available in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. A Better Way to Pray is also available as either a CD or DVD album made from our daily television broadcast and as a companion study guide. Each of these valuable resources is available for a gift of any amount when you contact us. Go to awmi.net to see all the ways you can get this teaching. We want to say a special thank you to the grace partners of Andrew Womack Ministries. Your gifts make it possible to put free ministry materials into the hands of many people in need. If you're not already a grace partner, we ask you to pray about becoming one today. Our helpline is closed today to allow our employees to celebrate the holiday. But you can always visit our website where you can order ministry materials or become a grace partner online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at awmi.net. On our website, you'll not only find materials from today's broadcast, you'll find a wealth of ministry resources available to you. To write us, use the address on your screen. We appreciate your generosity and hope to hear from you today.
Before you were even formed in your mother's womb, God already had determined a purpose for your life, a God-given purpose.
God has a purpose to train you in what you're called to do, and I tell you, Charis Bible College is the place for that.
Man, if you want a life change, come to Charis.
Come on to Charis!
You need to take a step of faith and start believing God for something big. God made every one of you for something special.
The next 2 to 3 years could be the most powerful time of your life.
If you sit under the Word for 4 hours a day, for 5 days a week, for 2 or 3 years, I guarantee you, you are going to have God speak to you and start revealing purpose to you.
We all have a purpose and a destiny, and you will find that out when you attend Charis Bible College.
Every one of you are created for a purpose. Do you know what that purpose is?
Do you want to connect with like-minded believers? Do you want to go deeper in God's Word through the teachings of Andrew Womack? Then Charis Bible Studies is the place for you. Charis Bible Studies are connecting believers with the Word of God in your neighborhood. Find a Bible study near you by visiting charisbiblestudies.net.